Japan, Part 163. Unprepared, the situation became an emergency as we had little choice but to allow the value of the dollar to decline in 1978 to about 50% of its 1971 value, while government officials tried to find short-range palliatives to stem the tide of growing protectionism. They hoped that the traditional market forces would operate, that as the terms of the trade changed, the American goods became cheaper, Japanese goods would become more expensive, the market would find its level, and the trade would become better balanced. This policy, based on the conventional and extremely narrow economic consideration, brought some temporary relief, but it failed for three important reasons. In the first place, because Japan is so dependent on imports of raw materials. The cost of these imports constitutes about 3/4 of the eventual price of steel and Japanese manufactured goods like cars. When the value of dollar goes down, Japanese buy raw material much more cheaply, and therefore the change in the Japanese export prices is minor. Japan is now able to buy oil, lumber, and other American resources so cheaply that it could easily disturb the American domestic market in a number of products and create new inflationary pressures. Labor-intensive Japanese companies heavily dependent on exports suffer with dollar re-evaluation, but companies buying materials from abroad prosper. The Japanese government helps ease the readjustment for those industries that suffer. For example, electric power rates were lowered in 1978 since the cost of energy resources had gone down. The second reason this policy does not work is that the Japanese find new ways to respond to the challenge by cutting cost, while the American companies temporarily protected because of the improved export prices do not feel the pressure to improve the fall further behind their Japanese counterparts. Thirdly, Japanese goods with the superior reputation for quality continue to sell even if prices are raised. If the Japanese formally or informally face quotas in the number of items of a particular product they are allowed to sell, they move into the higher quality market, thus increasing the dollar value of exports to America, while continuing to observe the quotas and without contributing to the correction in the trade balance that Americans had hoped for. Each round of temporary relief from the fall in the value of the dollar distracts attention from basic problems in the governmental organizations, economic policy, company modernization. Appraising American policy towards Japan, William L. Givens, business consultant and former Japanese specialist in the State Department, concluded, like protectionism, the floating exchange rate is opiate in the inefficient producers and the crutch of the ineffective government. The deterioration of America's competitiveness will have a far greater impact on our national life than we have thus far contemplated. As American industries fall behind, television factories must retrench, watch plant move elsewhere, and steel plants close down, with fewer jobs for American workers. Although Japanese takeover and modernization of some American plants like television factories will ease some of the burden, Japanese and other foreign investment replaces only a small percentage of the American industries and do not remain competitive. With increased Japanese profitability and continued trade imbalance, Japanese companies in America will draw heavily on Japanese banks and the capital rather than the American, thus reducing America's profits and increasing Japanese ownership of property and companies in the United States.